here in my command chair. You see my sink and stuff messy behind me. One day I'll get this place all dialed in, but I want to talk about Michael Saylor announcing that he'll sell some Bitcoin, or maybe sell some Bitcoin. So there's a couple things here. Is that it shocked the market, or at least the Twitter waves. Everyone, oh my gosh, Michael Saylor, the guy who said he's never going to sell your Bitcoin, hold on to it for life. Hodl, hodl, hodl. Right? He's built this whole business strategy with creating securities around his acquisition strategy, around micro strategies to buy Bitcoin. I don't even know how many Bitcoin he has at this point in time. He has a lot, and he's been massively acquiring just billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And for the past 6 years, this strategy has put MicroStrategy on the map. I mean, they were a small company, right? Nothing significant. And now they're headlines all over the place for them. And they've done extremely well, but they've also had some volatility and some downs. Okay. And his whole play with this is, how can I acquire Bitcoin, right? Create a vehicle to make that happen. And then how can I create other types of structures that other entities can buy, because they can't always buy Bitcoin. They can't always stomach the volatility, either by choice or because of their charters, the rules and regulations around how they have to operate, right? Their shareholders, it prevents them from owning an asset like Bitcoin directly. And so that's why he's created things like Strike, and there's MSTR, so people can get exposure to Bitcoin in ways they're allowed to through equities and through other securities, but not buy Bitcoin directly. It's like, hey, well, we'll take on that burden. You don't have to. You can trade in and out through the channels you already have open. And then, of course, the way he structured and set it up, it's actually worked really well so far. There's a lot of conversation that people have about, hey, well, it's all well and good, but what happens when Bitcoin crashes? This can't be sustainable. And I think there's some truth to that. And by no means do I think Michael Saylor knows everything, okay? The smartest people in the world, there's been so many times of really intelligent people where they have an amazing genius idea, but then that idea fails. I think there's a book called When Genius Fails. Maybe it's about the Black-Scholes pricing equation. I studied this a long time ago, but look up When Genius Fails. So many examples of just brilliant people, but the market is complex, and the saying is the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay liquid. So that's stuff that happens. So anyways, on an earnings call, Michael Saylor talked about the potential of MicroStrategy to sell Bitcoin to pay off or to fund some of the other other securities that they have, okay, to pay some of the payments that they need to have to keep supporting Strike and stuff like that. And the way he said it was, hey, perhaps in the future, we'll sell some Bitcoin to inoculate the market on selling Bitcoin, because everyone thinks, oh, once MicroStrategy sells, I mean, this was a big theory that people were talking about, that, hey, MicroStrategy is going to be the big company that blows up one of these cycles. So they were thinking perhaps this cycle, because of how much they've grown, how much leverage they've taken on, and all that they might be one of the companies that blows up and causes that bear market with Bitcoin. That could still happen, right? I hope it doesn't. Right, I'm rooting for Michael Saylor to win with his Bitcoin strategy, but because the guy, if you listen to some of the stuff, the guy is super smart, and you can learn a lot just by listening to how he communicates, by how he thinks through things from his perspectives, and you can learn a lot just by watching what he's done in the market, which is astounding. Okay, but he announced that, hey, we might sell some to inoculate the market. Now, people can read into this in several ways. Okay, one is that he's hinting and he's putting the groundwork in place so that if he is forced to sell, he obviously didn't come out and say we're going to be forced to sell. His stance has been very much, no, our strategiys is fine, it's sustainable, we have it under control, and which you kind of have to if you're the figurehead of a company, right? Even if it's you're stretching the truth. So he could just be stretching the truth. He could just be laying the groundwork so that if and when they are forced to sell, or it makes financial sense, like that's the move that they're forced into. Right? It's a game of chess here. That he can say, hey, look, I did say that we might have to do this. So, right, there's that. The other thing, I think that a throwback, and I could be wrong, but I think this is also a throwback to when Tesla sold some Bitcoin, and the claim was, and people freaked out. This was the last cycle, so not the one we just had, the one before that. People freaked out, And I think it was Elon Musk who said, "Oh yeah, we were just testing the liquidity of the market." Okay, so part of that might be just a response to that. Now, it's going to be interesting. And I think maybe MicroStrategy might have to sell Bitcoin at some point in time. Maybe, right? I wouldn't count that out. But I think a couple things to keep in mind is that Michael Saylor knows how much attention and heat is on him. He knows how many eyes are on them. I mean, obviously, because of the meteoric rise of MicroStrategy. So he's not stupid, okay? And I think he's very, maybe he's slipping. Everyone slips a little bit when they get older, but he doesn't seem like the guy that is loose with his words. Like, he's very calculated with what he says and how he says it. And he understands the meanings and implications of a lot of things he says. That doesn't mean he's perfect. We're all just human. But if he's on a recorded earnings call talking about this, he probably has a reason to say this thing, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if he said it specifically to test the market, to see people's response, to gauge that. I mean, I would, right? If I was going to say something like this, that's a dramatic shift. Even if I was like forced to say something like this because it's looming, the possibility that I have to start selling some Bitcoin, right? That's part of the plan. I'd want to know how the market would react, okay? And so I think that's very interesting. And so people can get really hung up on this. But at the same time, if he's forced to sell Bitcoin, he also has to have a strategy in place for like the best case scenarios, which is the market basically does nothing, right? Maybe there's a momentary fear, and there's some volatility in the Bitcoin price and his stock price, okay, right? And the worst case scenario where you have massive wave of selling and everything like that. And so he's got to be prepared for that to happen. And I'd imagine that he would be positioned to capitalize on that event either way. I mean, I would, right? He's got enough money and resources. I'd have a team in place, ready to go with strategies in place for best case, medium case, worst case scenario, and even in the case where they have to sell some and Bitcoin skyrockets. That could be a possibility. So I think it's really fascinating and interesting to see these dynamics play out. And I think you'd be foolish just to say, oh, well, hey, it's all done. MicroStrategy is going to die. It's going to collapse. It's going to bring down everything. They're going to start massively selling all their Bitcoin and just like screw over everyone who ever believed in them, and just totally toss out their strategy. There's probably a strategy on the strategy. Maybe there's some 4D chess going on. And especially if you're Michael Saylor and your company controls the massive amount of supply of Bitcoin that he controls, right? If you can create that volatility in the market, right, rather intentionally or unintentionally, and you can plan for that, you can capitalize on it and you can come out ahead. And so even if he does start selling Bitcoin because he's forced to or whatnot, or he wants to test the market, right, whatever his reasons are, I still imagine that he's probably got something on the back end to where he still captures that volatility and he still ends up winning in the long run. At least that's what I would try to structure and build, because why do you want to lose in the long run? I mean, he's not in the game to lose. He hasn't acquired this much Bitcoin just to give up and go home. So all this fear around it, I don't think you should be as fearful, but I think you should be looking at what's playing out and looking at the opportunities that could be created if he does have to become a forced seller, right? It doesn't invalidate Bitcoin. It doesn't do anything like that. Right? By no means, but it could create say he does and the market starts dumping, right? Well, then he has to, then you might have an incredible opportunity to enter Bitcoin in at a lower level. And maybe that's what he's hoping for. Or maybe he starts selling at the top, right? The timing of this matters a lot. So the timing of this announcement, just so happened to happen right as we're at this inflection point of the current cycle, where you have a good probably majority of people thinking we're going to fail this breakout. We're going to basically nuke back down and form the real bottom of the bear market and then start moving up later in the fall, right? There's a lot of people that think that. And then there's another group of people that think, hey, the bottom is in and we're actually part of a rally in a bigger cycle. The last cycle actually wasn't over. It's an extended cycle. We're going to start pushing into this super cycle and the whole market dynamics is going to change. Now, data and history is on the side of, hey, we might have one more big leg down, right? A lot of people think, hey, that's going to happen in the fall just because due to rates, high oil prices, and things like that. And we really need rates to come down, oil prices to come down. We need to have more capital unlocked, more liquidity unlocked to really flow into the space. So that's that position. But then there's the flip side to say, hey, we got a lot of good indicators out there in the market. Right, there's still liquidity. We have a lot of good stuff coming out with the Clarity Act and Washington talking about this, announcements about the strategic Bitcoin reserve and all this kind of fun stuff. And that's actually real. Now, again, there's probabilities on either side. None of us can completely predict the future. The safe bet, right, is, well, kind of a safe bet is not, not going all in and not FOMOing in. And, you might not catch the top, you might not catch the bottom, but at least you're positioned and ready to catch some of those moves. Okay. And the other bet is like, you always know the saying of buy the rumor, sell the news. Well, with all this stuff coming out, there's the famous old saying, sell in May and go away. So we conveniently have that timing going on right now. And so all this could play out to where we do get a dip over the summer. And I'd be curious if it's like because MicroStrategy starts selling now and they're going to reinforce that dip and policymakers are reinforcing that dip, or right, they're doing a fake out and they're really actually trying to push it higher, which is really interesting because I know there's talk about midterms and all of that and where it would make sense if the price crashed now and then it starts coming back up and rates start getting lowered leading into midterms to create a more favorable political climate for people to want to get elected, right? There's that whole game being played. And you also have to consider, well, maybe they're trying to play that, but maybe that's not the optimal play for them. Maybe they don't think they have enough time that if they did try to crash it down now, that it would recover in time. That's a balancing act. Who knows? All I'm saying is you have to consider these scenarios when you hear this stuff and when you're thinking about what's going to happen in the future, and you have to come up with your own strategy to navigate that. And my strategy that I am kind of playing is I'm playing short-term stuff right now when there's liquidity moving in and out, right? There's some attention here, but it's still not fully sustained. We're not at euphoric levels. We're not out of the woods yet. So I'm being a little more reserved and cautious, and I'm okay giving up some of that upside so that if there is downside, I have optionality, or when liquidity really starts flowing, that I still can capture some of that more in the future where there's more confidence in the direction of that. So just something to think about when you're hearing these headlines is to not just read the headline on the surface and think that's it, right? But just think about the strategies behind it and the situations that it can create and how you can potentially position yourself to take advantage of those. Hope you found this valuable. Like and subscribe and follow along for more.